Paraguay's Fernando Lugo has vowed to fight on after being ousted in what he's called a parliamentary coup. Is there any prospect he could return to power? You're watching Inside Story Americas from Washington. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu. On Friday, Lugo was removed from office in a 39-4 vote by the opposition-controlled Senate, which accused him of encouraging land seizures and failing to maintain social harmony in Paraguay. Vice President Federico Franco of the Liberal Party, a former ally turned fierce critic of Lugo, has been sworn in as the new president. The impeachment motion accused Lugo of poor performance over a forced land eviction earlier this month. 7 police officers and at least 9 landless peasant farmers were killed in a shootout. The farmers were part of a group occupying land owned by a politician from the right-wing Colorado Party, which claimed the occupiers were armed and trained by leftist groups aided by Lugo. Lugo, known as the Bishop of the Poor after he abandoned the priesthood for politics, was elected in 2008. Ending 61 years of rule by the right-wing Colorado Party. When he came to power, he promised to end corruption and give land to some 87,000 landless families in a country where 80% of land is owned by a tiny fraction of the population. Lugo has set up an alternative government and vowed to send a representative to this week's summit of the Mercosur trade bloc in Argentina. He's also been boosted by an outcry among leaders across South America who've condemned Lugo's removal and suspended Paraguay from Mercosur for the summit. Let's have a listen to what Lugo had to say.
This has been a legislative coup d'etat against the people's will, which on April 20th, 2008 elected Fernando Lugo as president of the Republic of Paraguay. This is a fake government. The citizens don't accept it. It's a government that has altered the Republicans' institutionalism. There cannot be any collaboration with a government that hasn't got any citizens' legitimacy.
But new President Federico Franco says the Paraguayan Congress has acted legally.
The situation is not easy. I recognize that there are inconveniences with the international community. I ratify and reaffirm that there was no coup here. There is no institutional breakdown. This was carried out in accordance with the Constitution and the laws. It is a legal situation that the Constitution and the laws of my country permits us to do in order to carry out changes when the situation calls for it. What was carried out was a political trial in accordance with the Constitution and the laws.
So was President Lugo's removal justified, and what's next for Paraguay? I'm joined in the studio by Michael Shifter, president of the Inter-American Dialogue. From Asunción, Senator Miguel Carrizosa Galiano joins us. He is head of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Paraguayan Senate and voted for President Lugo's removal. Also in the studio is Adrienne Pine, professor of anthropology at the American University and a Latin America specialist. Thanks to all of you for joining us. First, let's go to why President Fernando Lugo was impeached and a move that effectively removed him from power. The trigger appears to be this clash between peasants and police, and at least 16 people were killed there. Adrienne, why was he removed from power?
Well, it seems like the Paraguayan Congress was merely waiting for an excuse to get rid of a president who was inconvenient for them. It's clear that this was modeled after the Honduran coup in 2009. The same kind of rhetoric is being used, and the same kind of powerful oligarchic figures are behind it. What we see is a land conflict in which some peasants are trying to get back land that had been violently taken from them by the same people who now have sponsored a coup. The same people who are the owners of the media conglomerates, just as was the case in Honduras. In this case, Aldo Zucolillo, who's the head of the ABC media conglomerate, and being violently attacked by the police force. And so because of this violent altercation that's being carried out in the interests of those who are in power right now in Paraguay, supposedly Lugo carried out this poor performance and was simply and summarily removed without any due process. So it's a very shady justification and one that shows that allowing the Honduran coup to stand has paved the way for other similar sort of procedural coups in
That was
Latin
the coup
America.
that removed Manuel Zelaya from power, although he subsequently returned to the country. Let's go to Senator Carrizosa in Asunción. Senator, you heard there what Adrienne had to say. I mean, there's a big question mark over the legality of what has happened to President Lugo. I mean, there are many leaders in South America who say that this was a coup. President Lugo himself says this was a coup. Was it carried out to protect the elite in Paraguay?
Well, I don't think that's the reason. It's the opposite. I mean, one of his main points as a president was to do a better thing with what we call reforma agraria. That means with the land in the hands on very few people. But instead of doing that, it was incrementally incentive to violence in Paraguay. So that increment finalized with this murder between Paraguayans with 16 deaths, and in both chambers he underwent a proper judge that is in our constitution, in our 225 article of our constitution, and 98% of the law chamber voted against what he was doing, and almost 95% of the high chamber. And that's about 2 million votes, and he got around 800,000 votes. So I think democracy is something we want to conserve. We were under a dictatorship government for more than 37 years, so we don't want to lose that situation, and we keep everything legally, and not only legally but also legitimately.
Okay.
And yesterday in a television program, the defender of the president expressed that everything was done legally.
Okay. Adrienne, I know you want to respond to that. Michael Schifter, let me go to you though. You know, as I said, there's a big question mark over the legality of what happened in the legislature there in Asunción. And one of those question marks is whether, you know, the Constitution was in fact violated. Article 17 of the Constitution in Paraguay provides for the right to an adequate defense, and there's some who contend that the president was not given a chance to pose an adequate defense and oppose those accusations that were made against him. You know, besides the fact that, you know, they technically, or let's say, you know, if you look at the letter of the law, the legislature could have been right. You know, they could have acted legally. But when we look at the spirit of the law, is this a setback for democracy in Paraguay?
I think so. I think this, one could argue that it was consistent with the Constitution. There is an impeachment mechanism in the Paraguayan Constitution, unlike the Honduran Constitution, by the way. And clearly, President Lugo had lost a lot of political support, and there was an effort by the major political parties to remove him from office. But he wasn't given due process. He was really not given an opportunity to make his case and defend himself. And so you could argue that the legality of it, you could argue whether it's a coup or not. We can get into a lot of semantic discussions about this, but the fact is that it was against the meaning of democracy, which is a sense of fairness, and this was a way to manipulate the system, and I understand what the senator says with the situation and the sentiment politically were clearly against Lugo, but we have 9 months before the next election in Paraguay, and this seems to me that it's taking a step back, and after 60 years of single-party rule of the Colorado Party, this was the first time that one party transferred power to another party with President Lugo, and it seems important to try to preserve that and to move ahead. He was not eligible for re-election in April, so that couldn't have happened. So I understand the situation in Paraguay and the impulse that many people felt to move, but it was too precipitous, and one has to give due process to President Lugo. I don't think that was granted, and that really seems to be the crux of the case that's being brought by the presidents of the South American countries, that he wasn't given an opportunity to defend himself.
Okay, Adrienne, what do you make of the senator's response there, that President Lugo was actually responsible for creating these conditions where we had this violence take place?
Well, it's clear that when you have that long of a dictatorship prior to President Lugo's taking power, and also a case where he has an entire Senate that is stacked against him. You saw the number of people, basically the Colorado Party, the same party of Stroessner. You can't blame the situation of peasant displacement, which happened prior to him, on Lugo, and what little he has tried to do has met with great resistance. I think, however, the question that you brought up to Michael was really important also in terms of talking about this question of due process and legality. First of all, it's clear that when a president was given 24 hours notice and only 2 hours to defend himself, that there was no due process and that Article 17 of the Constitution was not respected. However, that being said, it's important not to confuse legality and constitutionality with democracy. This is a constitution that was written during what was an extended dictatorship. And it was written to protect that extended dictatorship. And we had the same thing in Honduras, where you had a profoundly anti-democratic constitution. And so recurring to this argument that, well, it followed the laws, when that's not even true in terms of due process, is really a way to evade the larger question of what kind of democracy we're going to have. And, that's true here in the United States as well. We talk about legality, but we don't talk about the fact that the corporations have greater access to our supposed democracy than we citizens.
Yeah, well, let's go to Senator Carrizosa. Senator, we heard there a lot of criticism of what happened in Asunción there. I mean, one of them being that the president was not afforded due process, that, he was basically given 24 hours notice and they had 2 hours to prepare his defense against the accusations that he faced in the Senate that violated Article 17 of the Constitution. And more importantly was the point that both the guests here in Washington made, and that is that you violated the spirit of the law of the Constitution in Paraguay.
Yes, I see the point. We voted, our party and myself, to give more time to the defense, even though during the judgment the defense didn't use the 2 hours. They used it only, I think, hour and a half or something like that. And we voted to give more time in hours, and also we voted to give 72 more hours to prepare everything. And we lost. And that is democracy. I mean, otherwise it will be an anarchy. My party voted for it, and the people who voted against giving more time to everything, they said the argument was that during the weekend it could have happened everything. I mean, bringing people in year 99, we have had another also president impeachment, that was Raúl Cubas, because of the murder of 9 young people in a park that is in front of the Congress. And they say they were very, very much afraid of having a similar situation. And after having 16 deaths, nobody was prepared to have more. And that was also the reason, we think, that make the Fernando Lugo said that he accepted the process and everything, and he went home peacefully.
Right.
I think everybody wants peace in Paraguay and democracy, and that is the main reason of everything what is going on.
Okay, great. Michael, I just want to get to a point the Senator made there, in that President Lugo, or should I say ex-President Lugo now, did initially accept that decision that came out of the Senate, but announced on Monday that he's forming an alternate government. What do you make of that?
Well, I think clearly he had a change in mind, and what happened, what explains that is unclear. But certainly, what it does is complicates completely the whole political situation. What goes forward now? I mean, certainly, if President Lugo had accepted the decision of the Congress, then it would be very, very hard for other governments to apply punitive measures against the Franco government. Now that President Lugo is really resisting and is forming a shadow government, that's going to make it much more complicated, because he is a figure with he was, after all, elected in 2008, and he does have, it's true that his support has declined a lot, but he still has his followers. And I do think he has some grounds to stand on. And it may be true that the Congress voted to deny him extra time, but this is a sort of a matter of principle. The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights put out a statement that was very, very strong along these lines. The Congress may vote for certain things, but there are certain legal guarantees that are part of democracy. And this was obviously violated. And so if they had given him these guarantees in due process, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today.
Adrienne, the fact that Lugo has formed this alternate government, does that create bigger divisions in the country right now, and the possibility that there could be a standoff between the people who are in power right now and those who want to be in power?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think that he's creating any greater divisions than already exist. When you've got a country where 85% of the land is owned by 2% of the people, that division is already entrenched. It's one of the countries with the most unequal distribution, and of course all of the people in power are also the people who are working in the interests of that 2% of people who own the 85% of land. So Lugo forming his own alternative government, I mean, what he's basically doing is defending the people who voted for him. It's not so much about Lugo, but it's really about, is this a democracy of a few people in Congress who don't like the fact that Lugo isn't completely kowtowing to him? Or is it a democracy of all of the people of Paraguay? And I think that's the difference.
Okay, I mean, there has been support expressed for Lugo by several presidents in the neighborhood, President Hugo Chavez being among them. I just want to look at something that President Hugo Chavez said. He's the Venezuelan president. He said that events in Paraguay do amount to a coup, and he was cutting off energy supplies to the country. Let's go to Senator Carrizosa. Are you concerned by the fact that Hugo Chavez is threatening to cut your oil supplies?
Let me, before that, make some appointments about what Michael and Adrienne were saying. And there's a very big difference with Honduras, because here in Paraguay, the president and the vice president were voted by the same people and with the same amount of votes. It's not that somebody else is taking the step. So that is, I think, in Honduras was the president of the Congress or something like that. We know about the situation with Venezuela especially, and that is because Paraguay is the only country in Mercosur that the parliament, the Congress, didn't accept Venezuela to be a member of Mercosur. So one way of entering Mercosur is taking Paraguay away. And you know that Argentina, because of not paying all the adult people that bought their bonus, they are not today into the normal financial system. So Venezuela is the only country who is buying bonus that are emitted by Argentina. So they are pressing them, the president of Argentina, to take the Paraguay away, and because of that, they may accept then Chavez. It's mainly Chavez who is I think if for you he's a flag of democracy in our region, well, we think a little bit different. If we can see, for example, Paraguay and our party and myself, we vote for not to have a block to Cuba, even though Cuba is not a kind of democracy, and Venezuela and Bolivarian countries also defend that. Okay. So now that here everything was done under, under what our constitution say, then we are now going to be blocked by the countries that are claiming that that should not be done. So,
okay, you know, the senator mentioned Honduras there, something that you had mentioned before. Honduras, did Honduras set a bad precedent there, especially the fact that the United States accepted the outcome of that coup?
Yes, well, the U.S. did, in fact, accept and promote the outcome of that coup by basically sponsoring illegitimate elections that, you know, were carried out at gunpoint by the same military that carried out the coup. And since then, you know, the violence in Honduras and the inequality and the usurpation of peasant lands has just really gone out of control. And not only that, but that coup and the letting stand of that coup has not only set a precedent, but you can see a development of it in Paraguay, where they actually, I think in many ways, were more clever than the people who carried out the coup in Honduras, in that they didn't specifically involve the military and are therefore able to make the argument that this is just part of our constitution. Imagine if every time, you know, we had a president in the United States and, you know, a Congress that didn't like him, since we've only had men presidents, they could just vote him out in a day. You know, if that's what they think of democracy as being, then that's pretty frightening, I think, in terms of the institution of electoral democracy. I'd also like to point out that it's not just Hugo Chavez, but rather a broad swath of presidents throughout Latin America, including some that have been much more aligned with the United States government. Governments like the government of El Salvador, Funes's government, as you know, as well as just about all the governments in South America, and even Porfirio Lobo of Honduras has pointed out that this was anti-democratic.
Okay, Michael, as Adrienne points out, there is a broad group of leaders in South America who are opposed to what happened in Paraguay, but Brazil would be key, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Brazil is the crucial player, and Brazil has condemned what's happened, but it's also had some ambivalent statements. I think they're not in favor of intervening in Paraguay's internal affairs. They want a thing. They're the regional power in South America. They want things to be orderly and under control and stable. And I think they're going to look very carefully at what the situation is in Paraguay. And I think if we did learn one thing from Honduras, we shouldn't underestimate what the domestic political situation is in the country. There are limits to what any neighbor, no matter what position the neighbors take, and not a hard line, and whether it's economic sanctions or diplomatic measures. If you have the overwhelming sentiment within the country in favoring one position or another, it's really limited how far the external actors can play. So I think Brazil will measure that very, very carefully, and they're the crucial player. Although Venezuela is crucial because Paraguay gets 25–30% of its oil from Venezuela, and so in the economic sense, they're very important as well.
Okay, let's go to Senator Carrizosa in Asunción. One other point, and that is you have an election coming up in 9 months. Why did the legislature not wait until that election took place? I mean, President Lugo, ex-President Lugo, would not have been able to stand anyway, but why not wait for change to come through the ballot box at that time?
Yes, well, first, the duration of his mandate is until August 15 of, so 14 months. The elections are in 9 months. One of the worry that people is a little bit worried about is that the example of Venezuela and Ecuador and Bolivia, that all those are Bolivarian style of governments, have not, they have making like kind of, like you say, fake democracy, extending and extending and extending the periods that they can be elected. And maybe that is one of the reasons. And also the other one is that the Constitution doesn't say when somebody deserves or not to have an impeachment. It's like you don't ask if somebody murders another
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, another man.
Senator, I'm going to have to stop you there. We've run out of time. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to both of you for joining us in the studio as well. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I know you'd like to respond to what the senator was saying. But that is it from the team in Washington, D.C. for now. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, where you can find more information about the program. And of course, we want to hear from you. Tell us what stories you think we should be covering. Send your ideas directly to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net.